figure out a way to wrestle fear so that it pushes you from behind rather than standing in front of you. Jimmy Iovine. When I was in primary school, our teacher asked all the students, what do you want to be when you grow up? There was the usual responses. I want to be a fireman. I want to be a veterinarian. I stood in front of the entire class, hands on my hips. When I grow up, I'm going to be a superhero. And I succeeded, y'all. You're looking at a superhero. I didn't know it at the time, that what I meant was I'm going to be a rapper, writer, slam poet, comic book writer, hip-hop workshop facilitator, but it's not as punchy. But what makes me a superhero? Not my superpowers. What makes me a superhero is my supervillains. Every hero is only as good as their rogues gallery. Batman, Spider-Man, they're defined by the obstacles that stand in front of them. Because heroes and villains have one thing in common: fear, which is the greatest superpower each of them have at their own disposal. And that is a concept that I know intimately as a hip-hop artist and as a facilitator. Every time I teach a workshop, whether I'm in a prison or whether I'm in a school or whether I'm at a youth work center, we always encounter this obstacle that either stops the words from coming from the brain to the pen or from the page back up out of the mouth to share with the class. Every single workshop, there's at least one or two participants who just won't share or won't write. And I ask them, what are you afraid of? And then I chuckle like a little boy at myself, because who am I to ask anybody, what are you afraid of? I am afraid every single day of my life. It all began in my origin story as my own superhero. When I was 5 years old, I was diagnosed with a hearing impairment called cholesteatoma. I'm not going to explain what a squamous epithelium infection is, because I don't think we're all med students here, but it's essentially a cancerous growth that thrives in moist conditions and can take over your whole mastoid and then can take over your facial nerve. It meant that I had 5 operations before my 10th birthday. It meant that every 2 to 3 months I was going to the hospital. I was having my ear probed with this horrible metal vacuum thing. And from a young age, I was introduced intimately to the severity of life. I was afraid constantly that one day my story might end. But where I discovered I am also the hero of this story was my very first operation. I was terrified of the unknown, afraid of pain, afraid of what could happen. And then a paper bag lands on my bedside table, and I tip it, and there is a comic book inside. It's an issue of The Phantom, and my dad is beaming down at me. And I opened it up, and at first it was just for entertainment, for escape. But then I identified with that character who was experiencing trauma and was experiencing fear and chose to fight and keep pushing forward rather than give in to fear. So, I was the hero. Didn't have to look too hard to find my first villain. And then, as I grew up, the second villain that entered into my life was bullying. Due to the severity of my worldview, I made a pretty good target. I was a bit of a walking nerve. But the good thing was that bullying as part of my daily life, as well as my cholesteatoma, led me to discovering hip-hop. And what I identified with was young, trodden down individuals who had been oppressed systemically and had given themselves power when they were told they were powerless. The voiceless gave themselves a voice. So, Batman became Mos Def. Spider-Man became Raekwon the Chef. And my superheroes changed. And I want to be a superhero when I grow up turned into I want to be a rapper. But I was an English Australian country boy living in Mount Dandenong, Victoria, Australia, on the other side of the globe from the Bronx. How on earth was I going to become a rapper? And my childhood had been defined by people telling me what I could and couldn't do, both in a negative sense on the playground and in a very life-saving sense by the doctors. Don't swim, Kieron, or you might die. Gotcha, doc. Don't take a shower or the condition could get worse. Okay, so no bathing at all? No bathing at all? And then as I started to enter into primary school, into high school, I had this affinity with words because I was working on my dream of being a rapper. But I got this idea in my head that it wasn't for me. I couldn't do that. I shouldn't apply all of my focus to that. You're not going to do it. I was afraid of failure. And that translated into, don't fully try because you're probably going to fail anyway. But, like Peter Parker and Clark Kent before me, I decided to lead this double life. I would be a writer journalist by day and a battle rapping, comic book writing rapper by night. But what that meant was my focus was a little bit muddled. I was writing songs, and then I discovered battle rapping and freestyling. I was entering rap battle competitions. There was very easy villains to identify on a rap battle stage. I was entering slam poetry competitions. I was writing short stories when I was trying to write nonfiction, and then I would go back to fiction, and then I would go back to nonfiction, whilst also doing a university degree. The punchline, yeah, I developed anxiety. Pretty severely. That entered into my adult life. But I was also making some headway. I discovered a talent for directing people because as that kid who had no idea how to become a rapper and had to start from the ground up, I wanted other people to not have to struggle in that way. So I became a hip-hop facilitator through the communities and the networks that I had interacted with during my battle rapping days. Everything was going swell. Cholesteatoma, 2-3 months, all good. When I had an operation, got to hang out with my dog, so it was pretty cool. Got to read comics, listen to more rap, work on my craft. Was all rolling pretty well. Then in 2009, I got diagnosed with cancer. Should mention that I was born on Friday the 13th. Right? My mum actually said to me, yeah, typical middle child, you would get 2 serious illnesses in the one lifetime, wouldn't you? But what that villain did for me, it instilled in me this immeasurable sense of drive and determination and almost this entitlement that I was going to be special. So I set my sights on a particular battle competition. I'm going to win that. And I won it. And I told myself that by winning that competition, that would be the start of the rosy golden days. Jay-Z would be my best friend. Kanye would be parking my car. Somehow, that didn't magically happen overnight. So this anxiety and not feeling fulfilled as an artist then started to become a pretty severe depression and became self-destructive instincts and habits. And all of my depression in my entire life has always been closely linked to my pursuits as an artist. Anybody who is creative knows the simultaneous voice that goes, you're going to kill this, you're going to suck, at the exact same time. But I managed to keep the story going. And then the anxiety kind of got a little bit worse because I was leading this double life, remember. So I was in a full-time job that wasn't particularly for me, but I was doing it because I thought that's what was expected. And that's what I needed to do. There was this daily fear that I couldn't cross over and follow my instincts and follow what I wanted my truth because you're wrong. But luckily for me, my mind was made up for me. Left the job one day in a particularly Jerry Maguire-style incident. And that was my sink or swim moment. I was sitting with my family, and they said, all right, so what publication are you going to go work for next? Where are you going to go now? I'm like, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to get the most menial, basic job that I can get. Night shifts, hospitality, just so long as I have more time to focus on my music. Started recording, working on a project, and because I had been doing this juggling act the entire time, I felt that I was not fully realized, and I was doubting every single choice, song, lyric, verse that I wrote. And coming up to finish recording my very first project, hated it. Despised everything about it. But, lucky for me, my decision was made for me. One day before mastering, engineer calls me. Yeah, I've been the victim of a burglary. All the music you've recorded in the last 2 years is gone. Cool. I enter a catatonic depression. On the couch, can't move. But, story keeps flowing. My partner gets a phone call. Her father has had a massive heart attack, has been flown from rural Victoria to Melbourne, where he needed to go see him. So immediately I was like, all right, we're just going to make this EP again. Nothing quite like that reminder of fear that death could be around the corner for any of us to motivate me. But I took some time, went to New York, the mecca of hip-hop and comic books, explored, developed as an artist, came back, did it all over again from scratch, got to the week of the launch. That week, serious chest infection. Can't move from my bed. And I'm just like, why do all of these villains keep messing with my story? But I performed, thanks to Robitussin and Lemsip and Manuka Honey. I'm not sponsored by them, I just really enjoy the product. And on the night, I looked around the room and I packed out a room of 150 people and I was like, I did that. But then the next day, same insecurities, same anxieties kept eating away at me. And the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And then that anxiety and depression that I never really dealt with became alcoholism. All tied to not feeling like I had become that hero yet. I wasn't quite there yet. Didn't know what to do with myself. Then again, my mind was made up for me. Cholesteatoma tapped me on my shoulder. Hey, don't forget about us. You need another operation now. You're not cured of that yet either. So have this operation or you might lose feeling in the entire left-hand side of your face. Wasn't too bad. Got to hang out with my dog again. He always kept me company when I was recovering. And I got to catch up on all of The Walking Dead, which was probably more painful than the operation in itself. Recovered, started to work on a new project, and then tapped on the shoulder again by another good old friend, cancer. Not for me, but this time for my dog. And he died at the start of last year. And what that was for me, it was an immediate trigger. I fell into the worst slums of my depression that I have seen. And what my depression felt like was life felt flat and bland. Nothing excited me. None of my passions fueled me with fire. I actually hated my own passions. It was difficult for me to get out of bed. Didn't value anything. Daily thoughts of suicide, walking to my night shift job, just thinking to myself, oh, this truck I could just, and then it'd all be over, and I wouldn't be in pain anymore. But, as well as fear being a superpower, I'm Irish, so I'm stubborn as all hell. So I kept the story going. And I was actually making some headway as an artist, and making some headway as a hip-hop facilitator. And then there was a sink or swim moment where I was having a discussion with my partner and she said, you need to do something about this. I was like, I don't want to go see a psychiatrist because I've had cancer, I've had this cholesteatoma, I don't want another thing to be wrong with me. I got through that, I can get through this. She's like, you got through it with doctors, dickhead. So I said, all right, here we go. Hail Mary play. I'll commit to health and nutrition. Not just to make me look like a stud, but which I don't need that much help with, but as a conscientious decision to work through my demons. So, health, nutrition, started exercising regularly, and it worked. 8 to 10 months go by. I haven't felt glum at all. I feel really confident each day. I've got a reinvigorated sense of purpose. All of the songs that I had been writing during the slum of my depression, I had a ton of material, started recording it, started the pre-production. Everything was going sweet. Start of this year, I go to start recording. The week of, feeling a bit funny. Go to my doctor. He's like, yeah, you got this thing called Bornholm disease. I was like, yeah, of course I do, doc. He said, it's actually not as bad as it sounds. It's just chest infection, which you're prone to getting because you had asthma when you were a kid. It infects the muscles between your ribs. I was like, so that's why I can't breathe and can't rap, and I'm about to record 18 tracks where I need to rap a lot. So I'm in the studio, trying to record, doubting everything. And this illness meant that I couldn't exercise as much as I had been. And my fatal flaw was thinking that I had found the cure-all for my mental health through my physical health. It wasn't a cure-all. It was another coping mechanism, probably the best one I've found. But it was foolish of me to think that the fight was just going to magically end. And I had a realization with my head in my hands when I was in that studio. Cholesteatoma, cancer, bullies, pointing the finger. It's really easy for me to think that I've had all these villains that I've had to encounter in my life. There haven't been. There's only ever been one villain. That's me. I make a decision whether or not to give in to my villainous instincts, which is to become a vessel of fear and not to become a conqueror of fear. So you might ask yourself, on those dark days where you're feeling villainous, is the villain going to win? Is the hero going to win? Neither. Neither can, neither should. Because what is a story without an antagonist? You're the protagonist. You are also the central force that antagonizes yourself. That is the story. Batman has been fighting the Joker for more than 50 years. He never wins. He keeps coming back. And he will always come back. Treat your life like you are in this infinite comic book second act that's never going to end. You've just got to keep the story going. Keep flicking each page. You might have some issues, but those issues aren't going to stop until the universe decides to cancel its standing order. So keep flicking the page. The hero to the end of your story is story. Keep flicking the page. Thank you.